So welcome everybody to this webinar. My name is Laura Nee and I will be your host for today's webinar. I have worked in the industry for over 20 years and I actually got my start as a trainer for planning and scheduling software, specifically called Primavera. So this topic is very near and dear to my heart. I know, in having worked with people and trying to teach them best practices of how to develop and maintain a schedule, I don't think that everybody realizes that there really is a process involved. And therefore, especially with the COVID-19 situation, I think that we're going to be having to really rely on the schedule, and it's going to become critical to the construction industry. So I was happy to invite Dominic Desalvo to join in as a guest speaker. We are trying to come up with a webinar series over the next couple of months while everyone's dealing with COVID-19 to try and come up with resources that are top of mind to our customers and companies that we have relationships with. So the agenda for today, I'm going to first go through some logistics as far as the webinar is concerned. I will introduce you to our guest speaker, Dominic Desalvo. I will turn the presentation over to him. He will be talking the majority of the content in the webinar. And then we're going to have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation. However, everybody is on mute currently. The participants are in listen-only mode. We do encourage you to use the Q&A window within Zoom and type in your questions as we go throughout the presentation. We really want to make this an interactive session. Unfortunately, it's not something we can do in person today, but we want to try to simulate that experience and really make this a collaborative type of session so that we make sure that we get all of your questions answered. So do type the Q&A window, your questions, and then we will stop and kind of review them as we go. And then I'm hoping that we have a chance at the end to open it up more interactively, allowing you to speak directly to Dom and have more of a conversation style associated with your questions and answers. There is a raise hand feature within Zoom, so you could raise your hand and then we can call on you, and kind of like a town hall meeting where you go up to the mic and ask your question and we can answer it. That's kind of what we're hoping for with time permitting. We are recording the webinar. By registering, you'll have access to it. If there are any others that you feel would benefit from watching this webinar, they can register for it after and get an access to the recorded webinar later on. So moving forward, let me introduce you to our speaker, our guest speaker today. Dominic Desalvo. I've had the pleasure of knowing Dom for many years, and Dom has over 50 years of experience working in a variety of different aspects of project management. So he founded a company called D&L, which is local to our Pittsburgh area, and it became one of the largest construction management firms for E&R. Dom has experience in working with smaller projects up to the largest of projects. So he really has a vast experience in working with all types of projects and have really seen the good and bad of a lot of the different aspects of projects. I also know Dominic to have a passion for trying to teach people on how to really, produce better projects and be more productive managing the projects and really understanding the ins and outs of the construction management aspect of projects. I know that he really takes an interest in trying to train and educate people to become better at construction management so that we can continue to run our projects more effectively. Currently, Dominic owns DEI, which provides project and construction management services for the design, construction, and engineering. And he has a specific focus. He's really interested in working with companies who are experiencing challenges with COVID-19 situation. So we're really happy to have him on board with today's presentation. I'm sure that you'll glean a lot of information from his presentation. So before we turn it over to Dom, what I would like to do is start a poll that enables us to see who's on the call. So we have a large group of people on the call today. So I wanted to just kind of start this poll. If you could just specify what type of role you play in the construction industry. So you should have a poll window, and if you could just click on the type of company that your company is, that would be great, so that we know who our audience is and can kind of tailor the presentation around it. So I'll just keep it open for a little bit longer, and then I'll share the results with everybody on the call as far as the types of companies that we have. And I know we do have companies from all different geographic areas too, and especially because some people are affected in, you know, because of the area that they work in. I think that that's relative as well. All right, I think we have enough responses to start sharing. I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So we have 31% owners, or construction owners and project stakeholders on the call. Some architects and engineers, construction management or managers, general contractors, specialty contractors, and other. So thank you very much for participating in the poll. We will have more polls along the way just to kind of keep you interested. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Dom to walk us through your presentation, Dom.
Thank you, Laura.
So go ahead and start sharing your screen, if you will.
It won't let me share, Laura. There we go.
Are you able to share now, Dom?
There we are. Sorry.
That's okay.
Hey, Dom, before we get started, I have a question here. Someone wants to know what program you're using for your background. They love your webcam.
That's reality. That's a background that Zoom provides.
And mine's just a custom background as well.
Well, thank you for the great introduction, Laura. I'm going to use you as my PR from now on. As Laura has said, I've been in this business a very long time. Looking at the attendees, I recognize a lot of familiar names. So anybody who knows me has heard most of this before. My opinion on scheduling hasn't really changed over the course of my career. The tools I use have become a lot easier to use and a lot quicker. Today's presentation is not how to use P6 or Microsoft projects. It's how to develop a project execution plan, better known as a meaningful schedule. This webinar is targeted for people responsible for a project execution as an owner, as a CM, as a general contractor, or as a subcontractor. Each group will have different levels of detail in their part of the schedule, but all the different parts need to come together to form an overall project schedule. All parties associated with a project should have input into the project execution plan / schedule. Is there a difference between the project execution plan and the schedule? And the answer to that is no. The execution plan is the development of the project, while the schedule is the tool used to determine if the plan is working.
Dom, you may have to advance your slide. I think we're still seeing your opening slide. There you go. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. COVID-19 shutdown has turned the construction industry upside down. We've had, at least in the Pennsylvania area, we have had a shutdown with no warning. We woke up one morning and the governor says, no more work. Our supply chains are completely upside down. And now, as of the 1st of May, we are restarting, but we really don't have a true template for what we need to do to restart. Safety procedures have changed drastically, at least in the short term, and I'm not sure that short term is too short. And labor availability is being questioned both from just the standpoint of, are the people going to come back or are they just going to stay at home? COVID-19 is a great example on why we need a meaningful schedule and not just a report to give to the owner to fulfill your contractual requirements. Most projects that were underway when the COVID-19 virus hit were planned long before anybody ever heard of COVID-19 or social distancing. Without a meaningful schedule that has been baseline pre-COVID-19 virus, the results of these impacts will be much harder to determine. COVID-19 impacts every part of our lives. Most of us are doing things today we had no idea we would be doing New Year's Day or even as late as Valentine's Day. The COVID-19 requirements for restart or continuing of construction activities that did not start or did not shut down will cause major schedule impacts. Some of these impacts are increases in activity durations, loss of productivity, change in work sequences due to the 6-foot rule, and just the availability of material when you need it. Without a meaningful schedule, there's no way to determine the real impacts of all these new changes. These changes are going to continue as we go back to work, and as the continued conditions change, our plan and schedule must change to reflect the impacts both to time and cost of these major changes. Are there any questions on this slide?
Not so far, Don.
What do we mean by a meaningful schedule? Meaningful schedule is a tool that we use to plan what we're going to do. I can't change what happened yesterday, but I can change what's going to happen tomorrow. In today's world, most people use a schedule to record history and not to look forward. When I review a schedule on a project, it is a great diary of what has happened on the project, but it is lacking what is really going to happen in the future. One of the problems I see today is because the software has gotten so advanced that people are able to manipulate the software without really correcting the logic to reflect the real conditions, therefore producing the wrong picture of what's going to happen. This is causing people to make critical project decisions based on bad data. Due to COVID-19, as Laura has said, schedules are going to be much more critical in the near future. Without a meaningful schedule, you will not know the true impacts of these new requirements in both time and dollars. And the impacts are not going to be just this week or next month. The impacts of this COVID-19 could not hit your job until sometime next year, depending on the sequence and depending on material and labor and everything else that goes along. So it's not something that is going to be short-term. It's going to be a long-term effect.
And Dom, what do you think companies can do to help prepare now for the schedule?
They have to go in and determine where the job was when the shutdown order came into effect. Now, even if their project wasn't shut down, it has been impacted.
Right.
The work rules changed, sequencing changed. So as of a certain date, and you can take March 1, you can take March 15th, you pick a date that makes sense for your project, and basically establish where was that job at that time. And then as you go forward, you put in all the impacts that are going on, because as I said earlier, duration of activities are going to increase just by the nature of what we have to do. If you were getting 6 hours of productive work a day, you're probably going to be lucky to get 3 or 4.
Right.
All that needs to play into the schedule, because at some point in time, you're going to have to be able to substantiate why it has taken you longer and it has cost you more money.
I think some people have questioned about how to represent the delay of COVID into your schedule, which I know you'll get to and address, but I think that that's what's on people's minds as well, as to how to represent it. I know as a trainer, we always said, whatever reality you have to reflect is what you have to build into your schedule.
Correct. And it's a great time to ask that question, because as part of the slide that is up right now is a logic diagram, a simple logic diagram. And the real thrust of being able to show the impacts is to go in whatever activities were ongoing when we say the coronavirus hit. Those activities now are represented in 2 phases: the pre-COVID-19 and the post-COVID-19. And to really be able to depict what that has caused your schedule, anything that was in progress at the time you deemed your project was affected, you now break into 2 categories, pre and post. And in that, if your job was shut down, you're going to have an activity that is the length of your shutdown, whether it be 30 days, 35 days, 45, whatever the duration was. And I know that there are people out there who are trying to come up with a simplistic way of depicting this. And I'm telling you, that's wrong. You have to go in and you have to change the logic. And for each one of the activities that was underway when this happened, it may be time consuming, but it is the only way to get the true picture. Because when you do that, you will be then changing the logic through the whole job, and therefore give the true picture of how this is impacting your work.
So you're suggesting to use logic to, also, I think a lot of people skip that step and they put the start date and the end date that they think they know for the schedule, and it's in their head, but then as things fluctuate throughout the schedule, you then have to go through every activity to change the start and the end date, as opposed to allowing the logic to take over that and be able to do what if analysis, right?
That is correct. With computerized schedules today, as I said earlier, with the sophistication today, you're able to manipulate the schedule, and a lot of that manipulation is really detrimental because it's not allowing the computer to do what it's designed to do and give you a logical path and a logical sequence of events. So, and as I said earlier, unless you have a realistic picture of what's out there, you can't make an educated decision on what I should do to mitigate that problem. Again, the computer allows you to play a what-if game to do your risk analysis without it costing you any time and money in reality in the field.
All right, thank you.
What is the most important part of the schedule? I think another poll.
Yeah. All right, we're ready for another poll. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll, and if you can put in your answer of what you think, appreciate it, and then we'll share the results once everyone's done voting. So what is the most important part of the schedule? Looks like we have some mixed results here. That's interesting. We'll get a few more comments here as they're coming in. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the polling and sharing the results. So we've got a high amount of percentage of planning, development of the schedule, lower of execution of the schedule, critical path, and communicating the schedule. So that is pretty interesting.
39% of the audience has already heard me talk.
That's right.
The most important part of the schedule is the development. It is the time taken to put the execution plan and schedule together. Most schedules are developed to fit within the defined duration, the contractual duration, instead of a real reflection of what it's going to take to do the project, both in logic and in time. But by not developing a realistic plan, you lose the ability to know how to really improve your overall duration, because you have put in constraints and unrealistic logic. Too many companies believe that it is better to give the owner what he wants to hear as compared to what it really takes to do the job. And I know that there's a lot of owners out there, and you need to be aware, you need to challenge who's ever putting your schedule together, that they're not giving you just lip service, that they really believe that this is an attainable schedule. And this is a plan to go forward. If you come away with nothing more than recognizing that the thought process needed to develop this execution plan is the most critical part of a meaningful schedule, I'll be happy. And I'm extremely happy to see that before we started, 39% of the people thought that.
and when we used to teach Primavera, the rule was you spend 75% developing the schedule, and that will make the execution and updating of the schedule a lot smoother as well. It's all coming back to me now, Dom.
Okay. Who should have a major role in the development of an execution plan in the schedule? Most people answer that question with the scheduler. And I totally disagree. The scheduler is way down on the list of people involved. It should be a group of people, including the project manager, the project superintendent, procurement people, safety people, equipment managers, material suppliers, and subcontractors. Anyone who has a direct or an indirect influence on the project. Remember, we're talking about developing a project execution plan. All parties involved in getting the project done should have an input. The owner, the architect, CM, the general contractor, the subcontractors, and the equipment suppliers. Standard answer I get when I tell people this, they tell me they don't have time to do it. And my answer is always the same. You can't afford not to do it. With today's technology, this can be done online. The construction industry has been slow to accept new collaborative technologies. But the COVID-19 virus has forced companies to update their thinking on how they do business. And with the use of technology available today, we are able to perform these kind of scheduled developments and updates much more efficiently. Things that took days and weeks can now be done in hours and in some cases minutes. We all plan every day of our lives. You all plan to attend this webinar. In some cases, some of you plan a week in advance. Think about the fact that if you were going to drive across country, wouldn't you plan out your trip before you got in your car? That's what we're talking about. Whatever the project we're talking about, isn't it better to think it out virtually before we try to do it with brick and mortar?
I think we have a question here, Dom. Marissa, do you want to go through it?
Yep, I certainly can. Thank you, Laura. Yes, we have a couple of questions here. I have a question. I am an owner and have hired a CM at risk contractor to build an 85 million high-rise building. COVID has not shut down the job. However, only 80% of the workforce is showing up on a daily basis. The contractor schedule is not resource loaded, but rather cost loaded. How can I tell the difference in the schedule for COVID delays versus the contractor just running behind schedule? That's one question. And then additionally, are additional activities required to track COVID?
The first question, as far as how you can tell, is that activities are now going to take longer. If only 80% of the workforce is showing up, then obviously 80% of the maximum that can be performed is only 80% of what was planned to be done. That's going to be reduced significantly just by the new requirements that are out there today. And it's going to take a rework of the schedule to show what the impacts really are. And again, even though that project didn't get shut down, it got impacted. Whenever it went from 100% or close to 100% labor participation to the 80%. Whatever activities were underway at that point are now pre-COVID and post-COVID. And in there, you're going to start to be able to evaluate what impacts you're having both in productivity, man hours per percent complete, and duration. An activity that was originally scheduled to take 5 days is now taking 7 and 8 days. And I understand from an owner standpoint, you're saying, well, how do I know that it is because of COVID-19, or is it just my contractors not getting this work done in an expeditious manner? That's going to be, you're going to be able to tell that just by looking at what happened pre-COVID-19 and post-COVID-19. Pre-COVID-19, an activity was being done in 3 days. Post, it's taking 6 days.
And I think also, if I could just add, as an owner, don't forget you have the right to ask the contractor to provide whatever you want in the schedule, contractually usually. So don't hesitate to ask for more detail or have back and forth conversations with the contractor to get down to that information. I think owners sometimes don't, maybe know what questions to ask either. So, we can help you with that.
And if the schedule isn't manpower loaded, but it's cost loaded,
Right.
the biggest part of that cost is labor. So you can determine through some calculations what the labor component was for each one of those activities.
Okay, I think that's all on the questions. I think it's time for the next poll, right?
Correct.
All right, so the next poll, I'll launch. How often do you think you should review the schedule? Monthly, weekly, daily? Hopefully not never. It is possible somebody might want to put that out there. So we'll let the poll go here. Thank you guys for being so good at participating on the polls. Makes it a little bit more interesting. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end. So we've got weekly in the lead at 66%. You've got monthly the lowest, well, besides never, and then daily 32%. Oh, sorry, I was supposed to share those results. So that's where they are.
Okay. The standard answer I get when I ask that question is monthly. I'm glad to see that the people at least are saying weekly. In my opinion, the right answer is daily. Again, the schedule is a dynamic document that changes daily, if not hourly. The review that I'm talking about is not a formal update, but a review to see what's coming up and how what has happened yesterday impacts what's going to happen tomorrow. Remember, this is a tool to help you plan what you're going to do, not what you've done, but what you're going to do. And that's going to be different for owners, CMs, GCs, or subcontractors. But it is the thought process that is important. As a foreman, I'm looking at what I'm going to do today and tomorrow. As a superintendent, I'm looking at what I'm going to do this week and next week. As a project manager, I'm looking at what I'm going to do this month and the next 3 months. And all this planning could change because of what happens today. It is a dynamic document, and we need to use it that way so that we keep ourselves out of trouble.
Hey, Dom, we have another question.
Go ahead.
What is the most effective way to quantify and present productivity loss due to added protocols and constraints imposed by COVID-19?
That is going to be a function of it. In reality, the impact that it is going to result is a loss of productivity. We're not going to get as much work done as we did pre-COVID-19. Now, there are several different ways of doing that. The most acceptable way in the industry and in the litigation field is using a measured mile. And a measured mile is a comparison of what your productivity was before COVID-19 and what it was afterwards. If you're in the business of pouring concrete, it's the man hours it takes to pour a yard of concrete pre and the man hours you expend post. If it's piping, it's linear foot of pipe. If it's steel erection, it's tons of steel erected. But in a lot of cases, it's a multiple across different units of installation. So one of the ways that I have used in the past is to say, pre-COVID-19, it cost me X man hours per percent complete of the project or my contract. Post, it's caused me Y percent complete per man hour per percent complete of the project. And that gives you a comparison of what my productivity was post-COVID-19 and what it is pre versus post. And the numbers, I'm guessing, are going to be significant. Everyone that I talked to in the industry who worked through the shutdowns said they saw a significant decrease in productivity. And I know that in Pennsylvania right now, construction basically started last Friday, so people are just getting their feet on the ground, but just by looking at the requirements that they have to meet, there are going to be significant loss of productivity just by having to follow the guidelines that are out there for them to do.
So your recommendation, Dom, is to reflect that in the schedule and have a discussion about it rather than assume to be too optimistic as well.
That is correct. That is correct. And again, one of the problems that we're seeing is that each job kind of is unique because of how these requirements play in different situations. If you have, go back to the example of the multi-story building, based on the rules in Pennsylvania, you're only allowed X amount of people per square foot. So now, instead of maybe you originally planned to have 10 people in that space at a time, you're now only allowed 5.
Mm-hmm.
So your overall productivity is going to suffer because I can't do work concurrently anymore. And I can't go from what I plan to do to a new phase along the line someplace. So it is going to get very complicated. And if you don't document this and track this in your schedule, you're never going to be able to prove what the impacts really were.
Hey, Dawn, we have a couple more questions.
Yes.
Okay. The first one, is earned value management the best way to understand the project status?
I'm hesitant because earned value is a very useful tool. It's also abused significantly in today's world. Earned value is a good way to track what's going on, but it is not the ultimate answer. It's data that you as the manager have to evaluate and be able to determine where you really are. I get hesitant on earned value only because it's a calculation. It's a computer generated calculation. And again, as I said earlier, with the sophistication of the software out there today, those numbers may or may not be as accurate as you think they are.
And it's a very difficult thing to set up in a scheduling tool. You have
Yes,
to do everything just right for it to really work. So you have to spend a lot of time up front for it to be accurate, to your point.
And again, when you have something like this COVID-19 hits you, it turns your whole analysis upside down. Again, I look at it as more of data that I use as part of my risk assessment in my trend analysis. One of the things that I have learned in my many years in the business is that no job goes in the tank overnight, although with this COVID-19, that could turn out to be a case. But traditionally, no construction job goes in the tank overnight. It's always based on a trend. And what I like to do when I'm running a project is to be able to track, and I track either man hours per percent complete or percent complete over time, something that gives me a solid trend line that if I'm heading in the right direction, then things are going pretty well. If I start to deviate from where my trend line is showing me, I know I've got something developing and then I need to start to address why am I not achieving my goals. Again, the schedule is a tool. It doesn't run the job. It just provides the people running the job with information to make the correct decision. And that's why I made a statement earlier that by manipulating the schedule, you are giving the decision makers bad data. And therefore, they may make a bad decision.
Question is, has data been collected regarding the loss of productivity due to COVID protocol compliance?
No, not yet. It's too early in the game. And it's going to definitely change from state to state because in my research, there's no two states that are anywhere near the same. Pennsylvania is one of the strictest as far as work rule requirements.
All right, I think it's time for our last poll question. So let me go ahead and launch our polling. How often should you update a schedule? Monthly, weekly, daily, or never? Which unfortunately is done by many. You create the schedule and then never look at it again, right?
The desk drawer and forget about it.
So just have a few more tallies coming in, and then I'll share the results. All right. So we have the majority of people saying weekly, the next daily, and then the next monthly. And nobody said never, so that's positive.
Okay, how often do you update? Well, it really depends on the project. A 6-week project is different than a 6-month project, which is different than a 6-year project. At least at a minimum, once a month on a schedule that's longer than 6 months. Weekly on a schedule that is on a project that is less than 6 months. But most important, every time you have a major change to either logic or duration, the update, you should include updates to the percent completes, update the remaining durations. And this is something that a lot of people, if a original duration is 10 days, and you say that it's 50% complete, the software is going to tell you that you've got 5 days left. And that's something that I disagree with. You need to go in and say, is it really going to take me 5 days? Or is it going to take me 7 days? Or maybe it's only going to take me 3 days. But there has to be input into that. You can't just let the machine do the calculation.
And
Hey, Dom,
Yes.
another question for you.
Uh,
When sending out the schedule to subs for updating, should the schedule be distributed as an editable file or PDF? How transparent should you be about the logic?
well, you get one answer contractually and one answer in reality. How's that? By contract, you're probably going to send it out as a PDF. Reality is, it should be totally transparent. If you're playing games within the schedule, you're just kidding yourself, because eventually it's going to surface. So my recommendation is give them an executable file that makes sense, because they may go in and find a logic sequence that has nothing really to do with the sub's work, but it impacts their accessibility or something else. So the logical answer to this is giving them an executable file to update. It's, again, if you really want to use this as a working tool to get the job done, there's no secrets.
And it isn't baselining really important. That goes back to my training where, people not following a formal process. You come up with this plan, you spend all this time on this plan, and unless you baseline it and freeze what that plan is, you always look like you're on schedule, right? So you have to use something to baseline.
You have to have something to compare to. Here's what I thought I was going to do last January. Here's where I am today. And then the question is, how did I get here? And more important, what can I do to mitigate some of the delay that has already occurred?
And that's a way to show COVID-19 impacts as well.
Okay. Right.
Okay.
Things happen between your updates, and you have to go in that update and make sure that you incorporate those changes so that going forward, those impacts are included, and you can see what's going to happen to your schedule in the go forward position.
Absolutely.
Okay, how do I build a meaningful schedule? You call me up and hire me. Are all schedules meaningful? The answer to that question is easy. No. In my career, I have reviewed many schedules, and I will tell you that a lot of them are not meaningful. And in some cases, they're not even good bar charts. A meaningful schedule is a schedule that reflects what is happening on the project and how you plan on doing things in the future. That's what makes it meaningful. It is the tool for you to go forward. When a project gets in trouble and we get called in, one of the first things I do is I walk the job. After 50 years in the business, I can pretty much tell where the job is once I've walked it. Then I interview the field supervision, and then I review the schedule. And in many cases, these three things do not agree. What I see in the field, what I hear from the field people, and what I see in a schedule are not even close. A meaningful schedule reflects what really is happening in the field. If you don't have a real picture of what's happening on the project, you can't foresee the potential problems in the future. The main part of a meaningful schedule is a realistic plan on how to get the work done. It is your best idea of how you're going to get this project built. It's a realistic duration for performing the work with the available labor, material, and equipment. It's a constant review and update of the logic and durations of the schedule to reflect existing conditions. And it's a review with the field management that are responsible to actually get the work done. Too many times, the people in the field have no idea of what the schedule says. They're just told to go out and do something. If you don't get the input of the guy who's really going to do the work, you probably don't have a realistic schedule. And the key word in all of this is realistic. Not what the client wants to hear, not what the office wants to hear, what is really happening on the project. If it's not realistic, you will not have a true picture of what is about to happen. And therefore, you will not have a chance to correct the problem before it becomes a major impact to the project. An example I like to use is before I start a trip, I plug in the destination into my phone to determine the quickest route. As I'm traveling, the road conditions change, and I may have to change my route in order to avoid a delay or at least reduce the delay. Your project schedule should be able to do the same thing for you on your project. And as I said earlier, a review of the schedule with your field supervision is critical to getting the project completed according to plan. It is the field supervision who must get the work done. They need to have input into the plan. What are the benefits of a meaningful schedule? Pretty simple. The project runs smoother with less problems because you're able to foresee some of the problems. It's a tool that can forecast the result of unexpected impacts. It improves your labor productivity, and it definitely helps you be more profitable. Remember, the schedule is a tool to help you have a successful project. And a meaningful schedule is an execution plan, and the plan is dynamic. It must be revised to account for impacts that occur on every job. The schedule is the tool that helps you do this. By using these tools, you're able to foresee potential problems before they become critical. You are able to manage your resources. And resources are labor, tools, equipment, and material. Better because you're able to see potential problems in any one of these resources before it becomes an actual problem on your job. And last, as I said earlier, it helps you make more money. And that is as an owner, as a CM, as a general contractor, or as a subcontractor. Everybody wins when a project goes well. I want to thank you for your attendance at our webinar today, and I hope we have provided you with something to think about when developing your next schedule or revising your existing project schedule to reflect the impacts of the COVID-19 virus. Stay safe. Laura?
Thank you so much, Dom. I really appreciate your sharing your experience and knowledge and advice for all of us. We have a few more minutes left for any questions. I'm glad to see that people were asking questions throughout the meeting. Marissa, do we have any final questions?
Only one, and that is, are we recording the webinar? And the answer to that's yes.
Yes, absolutely. By registering for the webinar, you will have access to it, and we will send out a link following the presentation. I would like to open it up to any final questions, and then we will just let you know what we have planned for the next webinar. So if you would like to raise your hand or be able to write a question in the Q&A, we can handle it either way. But I really do appreciate the questions as they were coming about. I think it's always more useful if we can address them at the topics. So I don't think that we have any additional questions, Dom, for you. So again, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. I have Dom's contact information here. Please feel free to connect with him via email, phone, or LinkedIn. He's a very valuable resource and has really a long, lot of background in all different areas. I forgot to mention you were a construction witness and litigations and things like that too. So you do forensics and things like that. So very interesting. We have our next webinar planned for Wednesday, May June 3rd, for June 3rd at 1:30, again, Eastern time. And I have asked David Scotti of Scotti Law Group to talk to us about how to review and draft and understand the contracts and liabilities associated with the existing contracts that you have in place for construction during COVID-19. So David's going to be sharing with us his knowledge, but we will, if we find that these webinars are successful, which the first one, based on the registration rates, seems to be very topical, we'd like to continue doing this. So we will be asking people what's on your mind, so that we can help arrange for some of the resources that we have at our disposal to try and help our community work together and really stand up to the COVID-19 challenge. So I thank everyone for spending the time with us here today, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much. Thank you, Don. Thanks, Marissa, for fielding the questions.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.